name is Matthew Asmussen. I live in Garrison Beach, Brooklyn, New York. Hurricane Sandy, I was 8. Yeah, I was 8 years old during Hurricane Sandy. During Hurricane Sandy, I went to my pop's house. They had 4 feet of water in it. And, like, pretty much my whole family was there, so everyone was just stacked in rooms upstairs. My house had 5 feet of water. I was out of it for 5 years after.
I'm May Joseph. I'm a teacher at Pratt, and I also started a theater company to work with storm surge on islands and archipelagos around the world. Well, I was running a half marathon down in Savannah, Georgia, but my daughter and my husband were here. And when Hurricane Sandy happened, there was no electricity for 7 days, and my husband fell down the stairs. No one in New York City had generators. When they ran out of these buildings, they have 8 hours of emergency lighting. Then the lightings go off if they don't have electricity. So all the buildings downtown, were in darkness. There were no flights coming to New York. There were no flights leaving New York, and there was no way you could come up by bus. I was in Georgia, in Savannah, and I wanted to take a bus up when I heard about my husband's accident. But there was no phone connections, there was no network, and there was no way to come up by car or bus or planes. For 3 days, it was absolutely hell. So when I finally got in, which was 3 days later, I went to the hospital, and people were put in the corridors of Cornell Wilde and in the lounge, in the waiting rooms, in the open spaces that were normally for patients' families to sit in. Those were turned into provisional hospital beds. We were saved because our building is the original 1609 water line. And a lot of my friends live on the street who live on the waterfront, of course, they're, million-dollar, multi-million-dollar homes. They lost their cars. Their entire basements were flooded. It took them about 6 months to return to their apartments. And this is using like high-tech pumps and sumps. And, these people had the money to cope with all the damage. But, I was thinking, what about people in the Rockaways? What are people in Coney Island? What are people all over the place that don't have the money to recoup the way in which the rich parts of town, like Dumbo?
I went from different houses. I went to my both grandparents' house. I stayed at for a bit. I stayed at my aunt's house and just like a couple others here and there. I moved back in 2018.
I stayed with a friend of mine up on 72nd Street and in Upper West Side, and I was shocked when I got in the third day how completely disconnected uptown is from downtown. And that's when I realized downtown Manhattan is actually geologically in a different kind of conversation. It's like low-lying, along with Roosevelt Island, Coney Island, the Sheep's Head Bay, all the low-lying regions. That's what downtown Manhattan's ecology is. And that once you get to 42nd Street, Murray Hill, and it starts going uptown, it's much more hilly. It's no longer low-lying. There's actually a geological big shift. All the areas downtown, in up to like 23rd, are vulnerable to flooding. And further up north to about 42nd Street, the hills already start. Like,
In my pop's house, what made it flood was the sewers got like turned off, so the toilets all got like backed up. So like the water didn't originally it didn't come from outside. Later on it did, but originally it started coming from the bathroom first.
it's like Rockaways. I ran into women from there who were like completely devastated, did not have the money to do anything about the mold and the seawater that destroyed their homes. They had babies, and they were living with that stuff. I mean, it was extremely stressful. I remember running to these people over and over, and they were so stressful about the seawater had destroyed all their furniture, their home. They were immigrants, so they didn't have a lot of resources, and they were living these cheap, rental places, some of them in the basement in the Rockaways, and they got really, really deeply affected. Everyone is affected by climate, and it's a time where class and economic differences do not make a great difference in New York City anyway, except that it is now in the light of adaptation, where the berms are coming, where the elevated parkways, these new like redesign of green spaces, gardens that are being built all across the shorelines of New York. A lot of those areas were originally wealthy neighborhoods that are being protected first, but now with the Lower East Side project, I forget the name of the project, that all the walls that are coming up on the east side of Manhattan, that's all public housing and low-income housing and affordable housing. Now that these parks are coming up along there, they're finally building infrastructure to protect neighborhoods that are not necessarily wealthy. There had been not enough done in Sheepshead Bay in Queens and Brooklyn on the waterfront side to protect the neighborhoods there in the Rockaways and in Staten Island and Coney Island. They have slowly recovered, but they at least were organized and they were able to, get a lot of federal help. But a lot of the poorer neighborhoods of public housing built by Robert Moses on the waterfront of Coney Island and Rockaways, they have been languishing for months and months and months.
We're able to move in. We moved in, like no furniture, nothing. Like I slept in a sleeping bag the first couple nights. We like had like a housewarming party and everything. It was really nice coming back especially because of the amount of time I was out of it. For a while, like while living there, I didn't feel like it was because I like grew up in different houses completely.
Because people are tied to the places that they grew up in. With the oceans rising, the Barrier Islands, the Rockaways, and Coney Island are definitely shrinking at a very, very speedy rate. And because a lot of people feel very tied to the place. But the point is that the federal government will not help them anymore. That is your value. Where would you go? Who will buy that? Who will trade in that? So there's some serious issues of fiscal responsibility, but it's also emotional. This is for a lot of families. This is what they've known for 2 generations.
Day of the Hurricane Sandy, I came here with my family just to like see the water, see how high it was. It was basically pretty much up to the sidewalk, which was crazy to see. It's the highest I've ever seen the tide go, which then resulted in flooding. So.
Hurricane Sandy happened only 10 years ago, but I could see it coming like everyone else. The science of climate has been there for the last, since 1960. I do think New York City is completely underprepared and unprepared for the next storm. I think there will be much more loss of life because we were only Category 3 storm, Hurricane Sandy, and there was so much loss of property and life because we're not prepared.
Let's say sunshine for everyone, as far as
and we've started 10 years too late, 20 years too late.
Someday we will foresee obstacles through the blizzard.
And we are so slow on the renovations for building up for storm surge.